One, Stephen Colbert being bad at his job becomes a First Amendment cause, but he should listen up to the advice from Jay Leno. Two, young men out of the workforce, not seeking education, checking out from society. And Zohran Mamdani believes in socialism, but only for you. His 5-star wedding in Uganda with Mary Katharine Ham. 3, Epic City, the Islamic development in Texas. An update with a man running for Attorney General of the state of Texas. It is Will Cain Country, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Set a reminder every Monday through Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern Time to jump into the comments section, hit like, hit subscribe, and just hang with us here on Will Cain Country. If you're listening on terrestrial radio, but tomorrow you have a different commute, then head over to Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe. Then you hang out with us on demand, on your time, on Will Cain Country. We're back from vacation. Two-a-days Dan, tinfoil Pat, and yours truly all back together again after 1 week. What's up, fellas?
Welcome back, buddy. We missed you.
Thank you.
It's not Will Cain Country without
did.
Will Cain.
I'm back. I'm rested. I'm tanned. I'm toned. I'm getting ready for the New York City Navy SEAL swim. I really do think I vacation a little bit differently than others. When I tell people about my vacations, they're like, that sounds horrific. That sounds like a terrible vacation. At least this vacation becomes a little bit for me like a training camp. But I love it. It's the most relaxing and rejuvenative vacation. I spent the last week in Hawaii. Family, friends. It's always a bit of a reunion because I know so many people that we end up socializing, having dinner, having a Mai Tai by the pool. But that's all toward the end of the day. One of my favorite things, and you guys know this about this vacation, about going to Hawaii, is the time change. It is 5 hours earlier than Central, 6 hours earlier than Eastern. And that makes it hard to sleep in. It makes it hard to stay, on local time. So the long and short of it is you wake up, you're pushing it to sleep till 5. And what that means is by the time you're up and going, you are seeing the sunrise. You've got a lot of things already checked off your to-do list before the clock even hits 8 a.m. And I love that because that allows me to not having anything hang over my head or anything in the way of total kickback and relaxation by, say, 2 or 3 p.m. And that's ideal for me. The days of 1 a.m., 12 p.m., staying up and partying, those are long gone. So I would rather my day be 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. than 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. And it's wonderful. You get up, you see the sunrise, you walk. I started swimming, fellas. It's my first week of training for the New York City Navy SEAL swim. Okay. I swam every day. And my favorite thing was that I've done this a couple of times, and I think I've told you about it. I did a 6-hour, 12-mile hike at Haleakala National Park, which is 9,600 feet above the cloud line. You hike down 3,000 feet, cross the volcanic crater, climb out 2,000 feet on switchbacks, and it is a total and utter beating.
By yourself?
Every switchback, I'm like, nope. I was one of 5, my wife being one of the 5, and I was second from last. I was not setting the pace on the switchbacks. My wife scampered up the hill like a mountain goat. And I counted the switchbacks like this has got to be the last one. Surely the parking lot is after the next switchback. Nope. Curse the skies. It's got to be after the next switchback. My calves, my Achilles, my toes, everything's screaming. But, man, when you're done, there's never been a better beer. And there's never been a better relaxation than after you're physically spent from the morning. That's my belief on vacation. That's how I think it's the best form of vacation. Get up, whip your butt for the first couple of hours, and then chill and relax. I know it's not how a lot of people vacation. They say you should be sleeping in, you should be partying, but I come home from those kind of weekends spent. Like, I can't get back to work. I feel good, and I feel good to be back with you guys. It's good to be back here.
Rejuvenated.
On Will Cain Country. Rejuvenated. You like the tan?
It's great tan. I mean, it's only a tan Will Cain can do.
It goes well with the hair dye.
Can I tell you something, tinfoil? I know a lot of people went on vacation, and they're all accusing me of it. Every single person. And then when they see me in person, they're like, oh, I actually can see the grays. But I think I heard that half a dozen times. Like, man, I really was one of the people that thought you dye your hair. I'm like, it's television lighting. It's lighting. I don't dye my hair.
Or your skin.
I don't know how else to prove this to you. Maybe I'm going to have to take some close-up photos for social media to prove that I don't dye my hair.
Is it even a real tan? Nobody knows.
We got a lot to catch. We got a real tan from the sun, not from a bottle or not from the tanning bed, or not from a pill. I think they have pills now that make you tan. I heard some guys talking about that at the gym.
Doesn't sound healthy.
You can take something.
I can tell you that right now.
It doesn't sound right, does it? It doesn't sound right.
I'm not
taking a pill that makes you tan. I got Ed over here in Dallas. He's the whitest Mexican dude you've ever met. And if anybody would be looking for the tanning pills, it's got to be Ed. He's been accused of being a güero his whole life, but he is not. He is. I said, where are you from? He's like, Mexico. I'm like, no, really. Where are you from?
No, like originally.
All right, but I got a lot to catch up on. You guys are going to help me get caught up today. We got Mary Katharine Ham. We got a guy running for Attorney General of Texas. Let's get caught up on what's going on, including my favorite story that I missed when I was out on vacation, the cancellation of The Late Show, Stephen Colbert. Let's get to it with story number one. Stephen Colbert and The Late Show canceled by CBS. Not just Stephen Colbert, but the entire franchise now dead. CBS deciding losing, I believe it is, somewhere in the range of $100 million or $40 million in losses. $100 million budget is not worth it for the partisan hackery and lack of laughs late night on CBS. This has become a cause in mainstream media and on the left, suggesting that it is in a response to executive pressure from the President of the United States, that free speech is under threat. That if you can't make jokes about the president without losing your job, that we're going to lose America. That's what I saw when I was on vacation, coming out of places like the New York Times and CNN. That's what I saw coming from the likes of Brian Stelter. It is total and utter BS. It is total agenda-driven propaganda and lies. And nobody can see that better than somebody who was successful in late-night television, Jay Leno, who just spoke about how you lost your audience at The Late Show.
I love political humor, don't get me wrong, but it's just what happens is people wind up cozying too much to one side or the other. Why shoot for just half an audience all the time? You know, why not try to get the whole... I mean, I like to bring people into the big picture. I don't understand why you would alienate one particular group. Just do what's funny.
And, you know, the one particular group alienated by all three late-night hosts. And three is probably cutting it short because outside of Greg Gutfeld, every attempt at humor in the late night has basically been catering to a very niche audience. Because the part that you're alienating is well over half of America. I thought Colin Cowherd, sports broadcaster Colin Cowherd of The Herd, said this really well on X over the last week. He said, regarding Stephen Colbert, Carson produced a show for the country. Letterman's show often felt like an inside joke. I loved both. Modern shows too often feel like they're producing shows for the coastal critics. Approval, hoping the New Yorker heaps praise. I think that is absolutely correct. But, yeah, I mean, are they catering to the same audience as Rachel Maddow? Are they catering to the same audience as MSNBC? Are they trying to just get the hardcore liberal audience? Or do they think they are in the mainstream and trying to get praise from who they think represents the mainstream? And that is people like, and publications like, The New Yorker. I mean, there was nothing funny and nothing even close to the middle at the end for Stephen Colbert. And the same could be said for Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, I don't know how much longer ABC can put up with that kind of thing as well. And when you're on a broadcast network, the design of it is for mass appeal. That's the point of mass media. Yeah, we can talk about what drives them, ideology, blinders, that kind of thing, but it should be profit. It should be audience. That's mass media, mass audience. And they kept carving it and carving it and carving it down. Thinking it was good business, thinking they were in the mainstream. I think it's interesting coming from Colin Cowherd as well because, tinfoil, two-a-days, I mean, I have no problem saying Cowherd is probably the best in the business when it comes to sports talk of framing conversations for the biggest possible audience. Now, with that, and I think he's been open about this, Cowherd will often talk about things that appeal to Los Angeles, appeal to New York. He will talk about LeBron James. But those are the biggest possible audience for him. I don't think he's doing it necessarily for coastal approval. I do think there's times when, and I think I've told Colin Cowherd this when I did this podcast, sometimes he seems to think like tech elitism and, Los Angeles culture is still mainstream, and I don't think that is. Like, you're way out of touch with the vast majority of America. I mean, that's one of the advantages of us being here, broadcasting out of Texas. I mean, when it comes to national shows that aren't broadcasting out of Los Angeles, New York, and Washington, D.C., who is it? Us? McAfee out of Indianapolis? I don't even know who else. There's some guy. Tennessee. Some guys broadcasting out of Nashville at Fox, at the Daily Wire, and some other places.
It's where Connecticut became a hub, too. ESPN, my old show, Dan Patrick.
And I think in the beginning, Bristol, Connecticut was a... Oh, did he move? Is that a done deal? I knew it was talked about. Is he in Chicago?
I'm pretty sure he's in Chicago now.
And you bring that up. Barstool is out of Chicago. I definitely think it helps. And to your point, Dan, ESPN in the early days being out of Bristol, Connecticut was actually good for them.
Yeah.
Like they weren't in that New York, they weren't directly in that New York media bubble, and they were much more representative of the guys watching the television versus the people on it. Look at it now and you say, how is this representative of the audience watching you or that you want to watch you? And how is that a mass audience? And I think, you think about so many of these sports people. I mean, it's not just Stephen Colbert. It's not just Kimmel. It's like everybody's racing for the smallest possible audience. I mean, Dan Le Batard at one point had a mass audience, or at least a mass platform. It never rated very highly at ESPN. And now that audience is minuscule comparatively and completely irrelevant. Now, look, maybe you could make the argument, making appeals to a mass audience is not authentic or isn't any guide or barometer to the truth. And I would say true. Sometimes you have to say unpopular things. You got to say true. You got to say what is true regardless of what the audience wants you to say. But I think there's a cultural ability to be in touch with people to understand America instead of sermonize to America. A lot of these things aren't just about what's true or not true, but what you think. Your interpretation, that's what we all do. We give you our analysis, our opinion, our best effort at trying to arrive at the truth. And the bubble that you've secluded yourself into is so far away. You know what's funny is they always say, I remember with some of the people I just mentioned having conversations like, with the presumption that I was in a bubble, that I grew up myopically, that I grew up, with only one lens, in that the way that you grow is by exposure to other types of people and other types of points of view. And that's the antithesis of what they've all created, right? They've they don't live in a world of true diversity. Shallow and superficial and cosmetic diversity, perhaps, but not real diversity, like on the individual level, understanding what motivates individuals in this country. And I think they've done the exact opposite of what they set out to do, which is have exposure to a wide range of people. 2 days, put this up. I thought Charles Cook over at National Review as well said this was, because now with the line that, this is a threat on free speech, in combination with NPR being defunded, he said, at the root, the NPR story and the Colbert story are the same. Progressives took over a product, made it so people didn't want to pay for it, whether via advertising, subscriptions, or donations, and they're now upset that it won't be perpetually bailed out by a third party. The third party for Colbert is the corporate overlords willing to sustain tens of millions of dollars in losses annually to seclude themselves from the vast majority of America. In NPR, it's that the government won't continue to subsidize this, not just minority, but radical minority point of view. And now that you don't get this, I don't get to make $15-20 million a year running losses and continue to have that entitled, subsidized lifestyle. And that's a threat to the First Amendment. That's a threat to the country. The fact that you won't support my minority point of view that nobody wants to listen to and is unprofitable. I thought it was really, really well said by Stephen Colbert. I mean, the ratings Cook. We get at Fox. What did I say? Charles Cook? What did I say?
You said Stephen Colbert. You didn't say that.
Oh, no. He's lacking in that self-awareness.
Yeah.
The ratings we get at Fox also say something about this. I mean, Greg Gutfeld absolutely smoking all of these late-night guys. And Greg comes from a point of view. There's no doubt about that. I mean, but it just shows how many people out there are desiring of that point of view. Go ahead, 2 days.
But a lot of people can find something in someone they want to watch on the internet. You scroll, you find someone that is funnier and is more well-read on something you want to learn about or talk about. So the
internet is for micro-niche audiences.
They can't compete.
That's what the internet is for.
Exactly. SNL can't be as funny as the internet.
Well, I don't know if that's actually not a fair comparison, because the internet is for micro-niche audiences. And we've talked about this in comparing the numbers, TV to the internet. It's not comparable. Mm-hmm. You're not doing apples to apples. You're doing apples to oranges. So when you say Joe Rogan has, 20 million viewers, look at that compared to what's watching on cable news. Bottom line is that is apples and oranges. The way those views are counted, they're not the same. But the internet is for niche. And by the way, Colbert may launch a very successful podcast or digital streaming show. He may be successful once he niches himself off and admits, I'm not for everybody. I'm only for whatever it ends up being, a couple 100,000 people on the internet. But if you want to have mass appeal, you might want to listen to someone who had some success like Jay Leno. Let's ask Mary Katharine Ham about this, plus what's happened to young men in this country as they check out from education and from the workforce. Plus, Zoran Mamdani has a huge extravaganza wedding in Uganda. How does that fit for a socialist? Coming up on Will Cain Country. Have you seen this horrible beating in Cincinnati, Ohio? A couple just knocked out cold by a mass mob of people. It's led to a lot of questions about what's going on in our cities, including a new executive order from President Donald Trump. Let's talk about that, plus much more here on Will Cain Country, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Hey, hit subscribe at Apple or on Spotify. Mary Katharine Ham is a Fox News contributor. She is the host of Getting Hammered, and normally you can find her on X at MKHammer. It's hard not to say without laughing, Mary Katharine.
That's how it's designed.
Do you drink on Getting Hammered?
Oh, yes. About quarterly, we do a taste test episode, which is how we euphemistically call getting hammered while taping getting hammered. Like, you know, you got to try all the canned cocktails for summer. You got to try all the fall beers for fall. You know, this is the service that we provide.
Thank you. We appreciate your service. I appreciate you also doing this today. Appears like from a hotel room. I think it could be your room. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a guest room. I had to take my kids to camp, so I'm hanging out with the grandparents, dropping the kids off at camp.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for joining us. Whenever you see a bed in the background, you're like, somebody's in a hotel or outside their normal situation today. Hey, I was just talking about Stephen Colbert's cancellation, and I was away on vacation, Mary Katharine, but over the past week, it really became a cause celeb. I mean, it became this thing, you know, at the likes of New York Times and CNN of a First Amendment cause. This is executive pressure. This is Donald Trump. He is crushing the ability of people to make fun of him, when in reality, what seems clear to everyone with any objective eye is you stopped entertaining people. You're not making fun because it's not fun, and you have no audience.
Yeah, it's so embarrassing, actually. Like, this guy, Colbert, who thinks he's like leading the major culture in this country, in fact, finds, as you know, that he's a micro niche guy. Like, you don't have a mass majority of people who want to watch you because this is the situation you've created. But having created that situation, he then declares that he is entitled to other people's money to make his media dreams happen. No, that's not how it works. That shouldn't be how it works for NPR or PBS or for Colbert. It's not a First Amendment issue. And by the way, if in fact it's so hard to make fun of the president in this country, then perhaps Comedy Central wouldn't have like a 14 times the size of Colbert's deal that it was given, where they happily make fun of everybody. But the way they make fun of everybody makes it funny. So people enjoy the product and people want to pay for the product. This is the difference. So I think Colbert's just living in a universe of his own creation. They also bubbleize themselves in entertainment so much that they don't even know that what they're doing is not funny. Like, everyone around them is like, rah, rah. His whole writer's room is like, oh, we're doing great. You give us our jobs. I think these jokes are fantastic. Meanwhile, as you noted, on TikTok or Reels on Instagram, your neighbors are writing better jokes than this writer's room on a regular basis.
Oh, when you said Comedy Central, you're talking about South Park? Did you say
Yes.
South Park? That you're right. Like last week, South Park signed a multi-$100-million deal. And I think the first episode of the new season was making fun of Donald Trump.
Went
right?
so hard,
and,
yes.
I mean, so hard at Trump, which illustrates the whole point against the guys the likes of Brian Stelter. You know, Mary Catherine, for people that are not in media, this may seem like, navel-gazing or belly aching, but I don't think it is, because it tells you something about the way information has been fed to us probably over the last half a century. Yeah. I saw this at ESPN. People that had points of view, even in sports, that were micro-niche, represented very, very, very few people, but were celebrated in the right places. And those right places became defined by, for a while, on X, before Elon bought it, and in blogs that covered sports, and this happens in news as well, or major publications like The New Yorker, made it seem like these people were relevant, made it seem like these people were talented. And they made really big salaries, really big for a long time, for really, really, yes, small audiences, but also radical points of view. And you were fed this. We all were fed this stuff. And those people made a ton of money for a long time doing it. And I don't know what that says, about the people running the companies, that they're all followers and they see who for a moment was getting likes on Twitter, then before X, or they're ideologues and they believe it as well, or they're just really, really bad at business and entrepreneurship and not seeing what resonates with an audience.
I think it's a combo, and I think they kept walking themselves out the plank further and further with their viewpoints. And you're right, it did influence the way that we talked as a culture, because at the beginning of this trip, maybe 30 years ago, these figures were the monoculture. They were our shared culture, whether we liked it or not. And we got other options as we went, but they kept taking their message further and further left, more and more radical. And by the time we got to like men and women's sports, people were so cowed, assuming everyone in the monoculture, which has at this point has divided into 1,000 pieces, don't agree with their point of view that maybe girls should play against girls. They're afraid to talk about it. One of the things that when Guy Benson and I wrote 10 years ago now, we wrote End of Discussion, which was about cancel culture before cancel culture had a name. One of the things we did was to tell people in each chapter about polling, public polling on important issues where they think because of the culture that they're the weirdos, but they're not the weirdos when it comes to abortion or it comes to men and women's sports. These are areas where the American people are the mainstream, but they have been told for 25 years that they are the problem and they are the weirdos and they are the outliers. And in fact, I think ironically, the disappearance of the monoculture means that the proper monoculture actually has resonance now, which is us. Like, we're making the decisions, and Donald Trump is the vehicle for that in many cases.
We're the
Sorry,
monoculture.
Colbert.
I don't like that. I don't like monoculture. But we are the majority. That's
the majority culture is what I mean,
majority.
right? Like the shared values
Yeah.
end up being default patriotism, sanity, all the things that we've looked for, like a valuing of faith and family. Those are our shared culture.
Right.
And what got presented as our shared culture for a long time was way far off from what actually was.
Okay, well, that leads questions about, like, for example, what's going to happen in New York City. So Zohran Mamdani is the Democratic candidate for mayor, and he has said things like he doesn't believe in private property, or he thinks that we should consider abolishing private property. The New York Post says, inside Zohran Mamdani's posh, multi-day Uganda wedding, complete with phone jamming systems and armed guards. So Mamdani has this huge blowout. It's a little bit like Gavin Newsom eating at the French Laundry while everyone else has to be shut down for COVID. He seems to, and again, it comes as no surprise. It's always the case with socialists. It's for you, not for him. Socialism for thee, but not for me. And I don't know. I don't know if New York will overlook this hypocrisy, embrace this radicalism, recognize this as radical, you know? Or is New York's monoculture or majority culture this, Zohran Mamdani?
Yeah. Look, he's a rich kid socialist like most socialists are. And certainly the ones who want to rule over other people, because then they get to remain rich while they make the rest of us poor. That's what they're after. He is a native of Uganda. He goes back to get married. I believe they eloped earlier this year, but they had a celebration. They're in Uganda, which again, let's live by our values here. Uganda is one of the lowest per capita GDP countries in the world, like 160 of 180. And he's out here with a millions of dollar compound, shut off from regular people, guarded by special forces and his own private security, so that they can just lavish themselves for 3 days at a wedding ceremony. He's not doing community service projects in Uganda. He's not reaching out to regular people. I didn't see any photo ops doing that stuff. By the way, he's also off the trail during the middle of a campaign for 2 weeks to be there. He ain't flying back immediately after this wedding, which I think is very strange from a strategic point of view. But yeah, look, rich kid socialists are all about hypocrisy. It's all about they know best because they were raised with all the money and all the privilege, and they're not going to check that privilege. What they're going to do is keep that privilege and make sure that you can have none. And I don't wish for that for New York. I wish for better for them. Of course, the menu of options they have is somewhat limited. I think I'd be an Adams gal if I were there, but it's tough. It's tough. And I think when it comes to a vibes election, the young guy with the interesting videos who can smile and talk on camera is going to end up doing pretty well, despite all his hypocrisy.
I don't know. I think I still have some retention of hope in New York City that even New York will reject this radicalism. I can't imagine this guy winning mayor. Mary Katharine, what do you think's going on with young men? I want you to look at this chart that we have here. It's the share, and we've talked about this from time to time, but this is a brand new set of polling coming out from the Financial Times. It's the share of young men who are neither in education or work. They're not in education. They're not looking for a job. They don't have a job. And it's not just the United States. But in the United States, the number of men who fit that category has risen to, I believe it's about, and these are 20 to 24-year-olds, by the way, 10%, which is a steep climb from the 1980s. In the UK, it's closer to 15%. In Canada, it's about like the US. In France, it's over 10% of young men, 20 to 24, show no, ability or interest to get on a productive path of work, look for work, or an education.
Yeah. This is very foreboding. I think societies with disengaged young male populations who don't put their time into productive activities historically have not done well. But here's what you have to do. You have to value men. You have to show them a path as a society. You have to value that path and say that the work you are doing is important to us. And then you have to not hate men or work, right? But our society, and certainly the left that has become this sort of fake majority culture projected on everyone, doesn't value the special things that men bring to the table, right? What they largely wish, and this is in the healthcare sector, in the education sector, certainly in academia, the wish is that men, by and large, should take on more feminine characteristics. They should be more interested in dialogue. They should be more interested in their feelings. They should be more interested in brokering peace wherever they go. Less interested in aggression, less interested in sex. These are what the culture demands. And I think when you are a young man who is driven by wanting to be a man, you don't have a path laid out for you unless you have a really good father and really good mentors who are there to teach it to you, because it is not the cultural default anymore. And I would recommend to folks, if you haven't read it, of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves, which has a lot of this information in it about how we failed young men. And what's important about it too is that if your liberal neighbors come to you and want to discuss this ever, it's written by a Brookings Institution guy, so they can't sort of write it off easily. He has a couple sons, and he was like, look, I'm a liberal, but let's look at the universe that we are creating for young men and how it is not conducive to any of the things that make them special and make them helpful and make them first responders and make them guys who repair your power lines in a crisis situation. Those things are valuable. We need those things on the front lines. But if we continue to denigrate them, we will not have them.
I go back and forth, Mary Katharine. I think sometimes in that I don't have any children in this age range, but they're teenagers. Yeah. And they're headed that way. And I look at that social cohort, and I sometimes actually feel more hopeful. And it could be a product of where I live, or in the environment that I'm in. But I see young men who are not fitting this stereotype a lot, meaning they value being strong. They are, focused on faith and family. And they are headed down a path of the kind of men that we need in society. So I do think there's some hope for some of these young guys, but the way you described some things does give me concern. And it's twofold. Number one, and I think Two-A-Days Dan, my producer, is going to hate when I say this, because we had a debate about this about a week and a half ago. And I'm not putting this too much on therapy culture, but the idea that you should always be worried about your feelings and what's wrong, you should be internally focused, and that kind of thing, I think can be debilitating. Others think it becomes enabling, that it helps you. But I think that there is a push to soften men to a degree that you become listless or stuck. And I think that there's also a secondary problem, and this is coming more out of primarily, barstool conservative type culture, and that is perpetual adolescence, perpetual party, drink, and I love sports, but just be stuck in that college party phase for so long in your life. That's what I worry about a lot of those young men, that you end up at 26, 27. And it's hey man, at some point it's time to get out there and be a productive man.
Yeah, I actually wrote a little bit about this for National Review this month in the print magazine, because I was writing about going over the Chesapeake Bay Bridge with my children, which scares me because I'm just not good at those big curvy bridges and it freaks me out. And I talked about, there's an option where you can hire a person to to drive over this bridge for you. But as a metaphor for life, I don't think that's a helpful thing to do. I appreciate the hustle.
Wait. I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah.
How do you hire
amazing.
someone to drive over the bridge for you?
Yes. So capitalism is amazing, and that's a great option for some. It's not a good option for me. So what I did is I did exposure therapy basically in front of my 4 children. Was like, mom's gonna pretend she's not scared of this bridge, and she's gonna make it to the other side where there's a birthday party that we're gonna have a nice time on. But there's a great scene in a series on HBO called Station 11 where there's this big apocalypse, and these 2 adult men end up having to take care of a little girl whose life is falling apart. And they say, well, what are we going to do? And one brother says, we're adults. We're going to pretend we're not scared. And that is a thing that I think many people have lost sight of. Many adults lost sight of, especially during COVID, that it is your job to stand in the breach between your children and you. I've been through things in life where I had to do that for my children. And it makes you stronger, and it is a gift to them that they don't have to process what you're going through. So to the extent that you use therapy to make sure you're not using your children as an outlet for this kind of thing, great. But I think there are pretty extensive studies that cognitive behavioral therapy, where you're going through with things, where you're doing life, even when it's hard, are better than too much ruminating. Because if you're thinking about your emotional state while you're going over the bridge, you might not make it over the bridge. You're going to freak out and have to hire somebody. But I think it's better for me and my kids to model, we made it to the other side of the bridge and everything was fine.
But I love the word you just chose to use, because there's studies on this. Like, if you look, and I can't quote the study, but I know I've seen stuff about this. Rumination is part of leading to unhappiness, like staying and focusing and revisiting and talking about and thinking about over and over all of these negativities or whatever keeps you in that place. It doesn't move you beyond. And rumination is the source of your unhappiness, where action and forward progress and productivity, that is the path to happiness. And I don't know, I think it's a little bit the opposite of what we're teaching everyone. And again, I'm not indicting all therapy, but I do think there is this thing, like one foot in front of the other.
No, I think this is, so you know this about me, and many of your listeners probably do, but 10 years ago, my husband died in a cycling accident. I was 7 months pregnant. I had a 2-year-old at home. And obviously this is like, hopefully about as bad as it gets, right, in life. And since then, I have made friends with many a widow who get in touch with me, or people who are going through crises in their own life whose friends recommend them to me, and I stay in touch with them. And one of the things I say, Will, to those folks is, I know it sounds trite, but you have to literally put one foot in front of the other. And it doesn't mean you ignore what happened to you. And it doesn't mean that you move on immediately. But it does mean that you eat some protein and you go out and walk around the block, if that's what you can do that day. That you make your kids breakfast and you put together a couple of hours of success such that you can, even when things are really dark. And that not doing those things isn't going to protect you from the pain. It really won't. The pain will still be there, no matter whether you're moving or not. And so that is advice I give to people who are in crisis, because I think putting one foot, again, almost literally in front of the other, is how you get through life, because you're still moving. You're still with us.
Yeah. I just watched. Have you watched Severance, Mary Katharine, on Apple TV?
Yes, I watched the first season. I haven't caught up.
Yeah.
You can spoil it. It's okay. I'll be fine.
Well, you know this already, and it's not a spoiler to say it's about separating yourself from your trauma. It's interesting. Yeah. It's a TV show that, in a way, addresses the way that we've tried to. It's like you create two different versions of yourself, right? The version that goes to work and the version that's home. And the version that's at work doesn't know about all the trauma in your personal life. It just goes to work and does that. But the one at home is stuck in that trauma stage. It's stuck dealing with all of that stuff. And I think in a way, it highlights, no, you need that productivity to move beyond it. You need to be a fully integrated person that moves forward.
Yes.
And I don't know if the word is beyond, to your point. And thank you for sharing with everyone if they don't know your story. It doesn't mean beyond, but it means not stuck in that one place for the rest of your life.
Yep. And you have decisions to make when you're at that place in your life. And I think, again, to your point about men, the other thing that our society has lost sight of is that doing really difficult things and making it through is actually what life is. There is no option. There's no easy option, right? But people get this idea that just by staying where they are, by not taking chances, by not doing things that are tough, and I think we send this message to children too often, you can just sit back, you don't have to do the challenging thing, that somehow life will be easier. In fact, it makes it harder because you get less practice doing hard things and getting through them. And so I think we need to change the way we message that as well. Because for men, like, becoming a man is very difficult. Being a father is difficult. Rising to the occasion and making sure that you're protecting others and providing for them is very difficult stuff that requires bravery and hard work. But if we don't encourage being brave and doing hard work, you'll get less of it.
All right. Lastly, I wanted to talk about this story with you. It's interesting. Elon Musk has said there's zero national media coverage of this story, which sometimes I'm like, don't be reactionary, Will. Don't respond to the provocation. But I mean, I think it is a story worth looking at. This is out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'll play the video with no sound because the sound doesn't help for anyone listening on podcast or terrestrial radio. But it looks like a couple. It's at least two people in Cincinnati, Ohio, who are jumped by a mob of it looks like 7-8 people. They're all attacking these people at the same time. The man is being stomped on when he's down. He's in that woozy, knocked out stage, so he can't get up. And then he's being kicked in the head and stomped over and over. He's white. Everyone beating on him is black.
Right.
Seems to be part of the story. Then I don't know if this woman is with him or not, but then she gets just knocked out cold in this video. I think her head hits the pavement. It's awful. Here is some of the response, Mary Katharine. Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for governor of Ohio, says reckless violence has no place in Ohio. Restoring law and order on our streets shouldn't be a partisan issue. I invite Amy McIntyre and others, Democratic leaders in our state, to join us in condemning this kind of violence and supporting stronger law enforcement in our cities. And then Bernie Moreno, the senator from Ohio, says the mayor of Cincinnati, who has an opinion on lots of irrelevant topics, has not issued a statement, let alone a condemnation of this heinous attack. Instead of dreaming about higher office, which will never happen, he should be ensuring his residents are safe. I'll say this, Mary Katharine, a couple of things. So I'm hesitant sometimes when I see these videos because I actually feel like I see these videos somewhat often is like X algorithm feeding me these videos, right? And not feeding me other kinds of videos. I do wonder about that. That being said, I do happen to see these videos a lot and I don't see the reverse. And I think there is an audience of, hey, here's a massive group of white people beating this black person up. I actually think that would be a huge national story that everyone would be talking about. And yet these come and these go at some level of frequency. It's not talked about. And this is horrific, what you just saw in Cincinnati.
Yeah. Look, I think you're right. If it were reversed, it would be a national story. Not every single story has to be a national story. That is something I think you're right that we should exercise caution about. However, this is like the Cincinnati Jazz Festival, right? This is a thing that brings people to the city, that they want to highlight, that presumably they want to make money hosting people at. And if you are not protecting people in those environments, your city will become less attractive for anyone to visit, period. You would think a mayor might have an opinion about that. But what lefties often want to do, and I don't know the particular views of the mayor of Cincinnati, but in general, what people in left-leaning major metropolitan cities do is that they try to ignore that these things ever happen and just pretend so that nobody will worry about it. People worry about it. Again, we go back to the culture, which is micro-niched at this point. People in Cincinnati are going to see this video. You're not tricking them that this is happening in their streets. You're not tricking them that people could have died at the Cincinnati Jazz Festival. And that is not what they want for their city. They don't want a city that has higher than average violent crime, but that's what they have. So if your mayor is ignoring that and doing nothing about it, and the people who perpetrated it are not getting the message that this will be very bad, if you try things like this, you will get more of it in the future. It's all about what you incentivize in these situations. And the governance of American large cities seems bent on creating more, not fewer problems for their citizens all the time.
And just start with acknowledging the problem. You have to acknowledge the problem in order to solve the problem. And culturally, I don't know what it is about the gang mob attack. Like, we tie this into the man story, but like, you know, you get in a fight, you get in a fight. How about one-on-one? You know, this idea that you're mobbed by a pack of people who then kick you and hit you when you're down. To me, I mean, that is cowardice. That is you're not tough. You're not a man. You're something else. And this idea that whatever it is, I don't know, 10, 7, 8, 9, 12 people attacking one or two, it's something rotten. Not just in the streets. Something rotten.
I think you make a good point, Will, that like if this were a fist fight between two dudes, like no one's ever going to hear about that. No one's going to care about that video aside from, you know, rating it on YouTube or whatever. It's not going to be a national story. And by the way, there were women involved in this too. I believe several women went after the woman who got knocked out here. But when it is a mob, yes, these people are defenseless. After hit one and you've got 9 people, congratulations. You've overcome them. It is cowardice. It is a different kind of animal. And I think it shows that kind of fight is a different form of public violence that scares people in a different way because the animal itself is the mob. The mob has a different like psychology than just a fist fight.
Yes. And I don't know, by the way, I don't know what that means in criminal charges. Like, is that more than assault? Like when you have a mob of people doing that, at some point it becomes more than simple assault. It becomes, when you're stomping on a guy's head when he's down, I don't know. I mean, at some point, I don't know what aggravated assault, attempted murder. It's becoming possibly something else with every additional kick, every additional hit. Okay, Mary Katharine Ham, check her out on Getting Hammered. And what is it? Normally, right? With Carol Markowitz. Normally. Yeah, that's right. Check her out at those programs. We always love having her on. Mary Katharine, thanks for giving us so much time.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Okay. Let me go over to the comments really quickly and check in with what the Willisha has to say. Miss Frankenstein says, Jay Leno was the king of late night. And as Carol Richards says, love Leno and Johnny Carson because he was the king before Leno. They kept the political playing field fair and gave lighthearted jabs to all. They kept it fun, not hateful, evil, and personally biased and nasty. Patricia Langan says on YouTube, haven't watched late night talk shows since Leno left. Shove it, Hollywood. Suzanne says, I wonder who or what Stephen Colbert would have blamed for being canceled if Trump wasn't in office. And then Pamela Cassis says, so suddenly Jay Leno is conservative? Who paid him to turn on comedians? What? He's being paid to turn on other comedians? They have to have each other's back as they chase themselves into irrelevance. Coming up, Aaron Reitz is running for Texas Attorney General. I want to ask him about this violence in the streets of Cincinnati and all these influencers on the right who are leaving Texas or Austin. Coming up on Will Cain Country. What's happened with Epic City, the Muslim development outside of Dallas, Texas? Let's ask a man running for Attorney General of Texas. Coming up here on Will Cain Country. Streaming live at foxnews.com, on Fox News YouTube, and Fox News Facebook. Aaron Reitz is the Republican candidate for Texas Attorney General. He's a former Assistant Attorney General for the Department of Justice. And Aaron joins us now on Will Cain Country. What's up,
Happy
Aaron?
to be here, Will.
Hey, I would love to get your take on what I was just discussing with Mary Katharine Ham, this video that we're seeing out of Cincinnati, Ohio, of this mob attacking a couple at a jazz festival. You know, this comes roughly a week or so after Donald Trump says we've got a problem. We got a problem in our major American cities. We got a problem with vagrancy. He's talking there about the homeless. That's not what's going on in this video necessarily. But it does, the two stories together show a problem in major American cities. And you probably heard me talking there before you jumped on about this idea of 10 to 12 people beating on one or two that seems to me something much more than simple assault.
It's definitely something much more than simple assault, Will. And I appreciate you highlighting what happened in Cincinnati because, you know, the mainstream corporate media, the legacy media, is not covering it. We all know, and you talked about this with Mary Katharine just a moment ago, we all know what would happen if the roles were reversed. If this was a mob of whites just beating on a black couple, we'd be having yet another BLM summer of 2020. And what's alarming to me is that since that summer, the BLM terror summer, the fiery but mostly peaceful summer, groups like what you saw in Cincinnati have become totally emboldened to being able to get away with these sorts of things. We all know that they're not going to be prosecuted. We all know that the overwhelming majority of them are going to get away with it. Sure, somebody might throw some of us some crumbs, and maybe you might see 1 or 2 arrests and prosecutions, but this isn't just happening in Cincinnati. We're getting coverage of it because of so many videos playing. This emboldened street crime, this mob crime, this swarming of incensed people who are out for blood, know that they're going to get the cover of the mainstream media, the Democrats that are ruling their various cities and their states. And it's unconscionable what's happening. And we got to throw their butts in jail. And as Texas Attorney General, you can be sure that I'm going to make sure things like this don't happen on the streets of Texas.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about the coverage, because the implication is if you cover it and you talk about the aspects of it that are obvious, then you're a racist. If you point out that this is happening, then you're a racist. If the racial roles were reversed, we'd be talking about the aggressors being racist. You know, that's what we would be doing. So it's this situation where you can't acknowledge a reality only in one direction at the price of being called a racist, and nobody wants to be called that. But you know, this, I don't know what you said. It's not just assault. So what could you do? Okay, Texas Attorney General, and I know this is a county level crime or city level crime, and prosecutors at that district attorney or county attorney level. But this is something different than an assault. What is it? Is it attempted murder at some point? What is it?
That's what I was just going to say. You could probably make a credible claim if somebody's knocked out cold on the ground and you continue to pummel them and smash their heads with the heels of your boots, and it's just a swarm of people doing so. If I were a county prosecutor, I would go for attempted murder in as many of those individuals that we get on camera as possible. So, look, I think that what we need right now is we need political leaders who are unafraid of this now completely empty phrase, this accusation of you're racist. If you just notice these things, look, we all live and breathe in our relative communities. I live in Austin. I'm talking to you from Austin. You're up in the DFW area. We all see these things. We're just observing what the world around us has become under Democratic rule and under emboldened mob violence since the BLM terror summer of 2020. If someone wants to call you racist, it should be water right off of a duck's back. It doesn't matter. These are cheap shots. Nobody cares. The term has lost all meaning. Does that mean that there isn't such thing as racism? Of course not. There is such a thing as that. But when the left uses these terms, you're a racist, you're a Nazi, you're a totalitarian, you're a dictator, you know what? Screw them. It doesn't matter. These terms don't matter. And what we need in public office are public leaders who have shown themselves to not give a damn about what the left is calling me. When I got confirmed, I most recently served in the Justice Department, and the senior Democrat, Dick Durbin, on the Judiciary Committee, called me a danger to the rule of law. Oh my gosh. Like, you know what? Who cares? It's not racist to notice what's happening in our cities, and we need leaders to throw people in jail, to prosecute, to indict, and to clean up our streets. President Trump knows this. It's why he just signed this executive order that you referenced about cleaning up vagrancy in our streets. It's a little bit different than the crime issue, but it's part of the law and order agenda that I and we love to see this coming out of the administration. We've got these problems here in Texas too. We're a law and order state, but this kind of stuff happens right here.
Okay, let's talk about that. Speaking of vagrancy, you said you were in Austin. Here's the headline in the Daily Mail. Conservative stars now regret leaving California to follow Joe Rogan to Texas. It references comedian Tim Dillon, commentator Blair White, comedian MMA, I believe he's an MMA fighter, Brendan Schaub. He's one of Joe Rogan's buddies, and a couple of others who moved to Austin and and so they don't like it. Even Shane Gillis has said he doesn't like Austin, or he has severe criticism for Austin. Andrew Schultz says Texas effing blows. It's hot. The second we ran out of power, the house was 90 degrees and bugs came in immediately. The house was filled with bugs. I think that was Gillis or Schultz. And they're talking about Austin in a lot of ways. And I'll tell you, I don't know if you're originally from Texas. I know you said you live in Austin now. There's a part of me that's a little offended. You moved here from L.A., and you have all this criticism of Texas. There's a part of me that's like, you chose to go to Austin, as close as it gets to L.A. in Texas. And then there's a part of me that's like, maybe you weren't a fit anyway in Texas, you know, if you're going now back to California. Like, you didn't come here to appreciate what it was anyway. But what do you think about all these people who tried it out and are leaving Texas?
Yeah, look, haters are going to hate. Haters are going to hate. What can you do? Look, I think that your last comment is kind of where I land on this, Will, is like, you probably weren't a good fit in the first place. And look, I know a lot of what my old boss, Senator Cruz, likes to describe certain people as refugees for freedom. And I understand that during the COVID era, places like California really became inhospitable. I was in the AG's office when COVID was spiking, and I was litigating all of these major cities that were trying to shut down. I mean, big blue cities like Austin and Dallas and Houston were trying to shut down our cities and making it difficult to live and breathe, quite literally. And so we were trying to keep these cities open. And so during that time, we welcomed a lot of people who couldn't deal with that stuff in their blue states, and they came here to live and breathe free. But look, now that we're sort of past that, the peak of the COVID era, they're beginning to experience what Texas is like, and maybe it's not a good fit. I will tell you this, though. Some of these critics are on to something. There was one commentator, I read that article when it came out over the weekend, and they said, look, some of these cities, in Austin in particular, are becoming just sort of this soulless, corporate, leftist type of milieu, right, where they live in. And that's in part why I'm running for Texas AG, because we're really in a battle for the soul of this country. A lot of people are moving to Texas for opportunity or job relocations or whatnot, and they realize that in the urban cores, they're really no different than a lot of the far left cities that they escaped from. And that's got to stop. It's why we need a Texas AG to ensure that the liberal excesses that you see, especially in Austin. My wife and I are originally from San Antonio. It's not as bad in San Antonio as it is in Austin, but you need that state level leadership to sort of box in the excesses, whether it's the lack of law enforcement or the homeless crisis or the non-prosecution from our Soros-funded DA that we have right here in Austin. So there is a grain of what they're saying that I think resonates. But at the end of the day, if Texas isn't a good fit for you, see you later. Enjoy the other state that you want to go back home to.
No, but you're right. And that's not a Texas unique thing. Every big city is what you just described across America. Basically, right. Every big city is blue and dealing with some of those exact same issues. And the question is whether or not it has to be the way. If that has to be the way, is that the only way to grow a big population, an urban population?
Right.
No. By the way,
we don't.
Dallas,
we don't.
It's not perfect, but Dallas is doing a pretty good job. It's not perfect. It's got its issues, but it's an illustration of. I live here. I think Dallas has been done pretty well. You know, could it be safer? Yeah.
All things considered, I think
it's in downtown Dallas. Yeah.
Yeah, look, now I will say this, probably the worst enemy of liberty and freedom during the COVID era was a Dallas County judge, Clay Jenkins. I mean, he was like the shutdown, lockdown king. Yeah. He was terrible, but we brought him to court all the time. It's not as bad in Dallas in some instances as in Austin. But, you know, look, to your point, Will, we don't have to live this way. It doesn't have to be like this. What it takes is courage, focus, ability. And you have to have, this is in part why I'm running for AG, because I don't give a damn what these leftists think. We're coming for you. You're not allowed to make Travis County or the city of Austin or these other deep blue cities and counties un-Texan. Texas is a way of life. Right. Texas has state level laws, and those laws have got to be enforced to ensure that, yeah, look, Austin's always going to be quirky. We've all heard the phrase, keep Austin weird. there's a part of that is natural to Austin, but I don't want to see homeless people defecating on the streets. I don't want to see vagrant mobs on 6th Street in Austin like what we see in Cincinnati. That kind of thing's happening every other weekend right here in Austin. We don't have to live this way, and we need an AG that's going to stop it.
Well, I appreciate that when it comes to Texas, but I think for everybody listening, I think that's the same. If you're in Nashville, you have, it doesn't have to be that way. If you live in Atlanta, it doesn't have to be that way in Georgia. No matter where you are. In Cincinnati, it doesn't have to be that way in Ohio.
Right.
All right, last, I want to get an update from you. You're running for Texas Attorney General. Your predecessor, Ken Paxton, has been on this to some degree. He and I have had conversations about this. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, has talked about this. The potential for these developments, for example, there's one outside of Dallas called Epic City that is as envisioned. It hasn't broke ground. An Islamic development centered around a mosque. There are questions. They denied it. It would be, exclusive, that there would be only Muslims allowed to live there. Anybody could live, they say, but it'd be a way of life inside of that community centered around Islam. I'm curious, you were at the DOJ, you work for Ted Cruz, you're running for Attorney General. I am curious what the limitations are inside the law on a private developer who isn't putting exclusionary restrictions on something to develop a community around a set of values or ideals. And the reason I ask that is, you'd like to think that's possible in a lot of different applications. And then you say, well, we're going to let that happen, though, with one that is inherently antagonistic to the greater values of not just our state, but our country.
Yeah, Will, what you're referring to is the East Plano Islamic Community City, Epic City it's called. Epic itself is Texas's largest mosque. It's in the DFW area. And now they formed a corporate entity to break ground out in a very rural, isolated area where they can have an all-in-one, all-inclusive community that is designed for and only for Muslims and members of the Islamic faith. They call it Epic City. Okay, now I wrote an op-ed on Daily Wire Online actually last week about this exact issue. And the problem here is we all know what's going to happen with a city like this. It's not as if Epic City, the people running Epic City are not stupid. It's not as if they're erecting de jure Islamism right here in Texas. It's not like they have on their rules and regulations to buy into the city or buy an interest in the property that they're saying, thou shalt be a Muslim in order to buy here and you can't. That's not the issue. The issue is what it is, not what are the de jure rules, but what are the de facto rules and regulations? What is actually going to become of Epic City? And the managers of Epic City and those people who are running cover for them are wanting us to not believe our lying eyes. When we see these Islamist ghettos that set up in all of the major cities, especially in Europe, but it's taking root here in the United States as well, we know what's coming. And so what Epic City has done actually is they've hired a huge bench of PR firms and lawyers and lobbyists to sort of trick Texans into believing that what they're doing is really just totally fine and in accordance with the law. But we all know better. Texans ought not to be fooled about what's going to happen. And so the AG and the governor's office and several of his agencies are aggressively investigating whether there's a there. Is what they're telling us actually true? And we're going to get to the bottom of it. As the next Texas Attorney General, you can guarantee that I'm going to zoom in on that microscope and find out exactly what sort of nefarious goals Epic City is up to. And if they give me even the slightest thread to pull on, I'm going to pull on that thing as hard as I possibly can so that Epic City's vision can come unraveled completely. We will not have Muslim-only or Sharia law cities in Texas, and I'm the guy best equipped to make sure that doesn't happen.
All right, I said his predecessor, not yet for either of them. Ken Paxton running for senator. Aaron Reitz is running for Texas Attorney General. And we appreciate you coming on today and letting us get to know you a little bit and what you think on some of these issues. We'll hope you stick around, come back, and be more frequent guest here.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Will. Appreciate you having me on.
All right. Aaron Reitz here on Will Cain Country. Okay. Well, we're back. We're out of the gates. shaking off the rust. Let's do it again tomorrow. What do you say? Right here, same time, same place. Fox YouTube, Fox Facebook, Spotify, or Apple. I'll see you again next time.